The first time Grant framed the plan as a strategy, I thought he addressed a selfish impulse in a suit and expected applause. I am Elena Moreno. I write for a living and have spent a decade taking vague ideas and forcing them to put on grammar and show up to work. Grant works at a technology company in Seattle and has been angling for a promotion that he believes will lift him to the oxygen he deserves. He started by saying that networking is not a sin and that some people are born inside circles while others have to learn to draw them. He started by saying that his senior vice president values loyalty and proximity. He started by saying that my talent for reading rooms might finally be useful to us in a serious way. The phrase useful to us fell into the kitchen like a coin on tile. I stood there with a mug of coffee that had cooled into honesty and asked him what he meant. He said that Victoria, his boss, responds to people who understand her rhythm, that she trusts family, that her world is built on alliances that begin socially and end at the budget table. He said that it would help if I were closer to her. He said that she was single and busy, and not particularly sentimental about lines that other people insist on drawing. He did not say the word affair. He just drew an outline and pushed it across the table like a contract he believed I would sign without asking for red lines. I told him that I am not a tool he can borrow for a pitch. He told me that I am being dramatic and that this is business as usual. He said that marriages are built on sacrifice and that men make sacrifices all the time for their wives. He said now it is my turn. The house lost a degree of heat as he spoke, and I saw the room properly for the first time. We were not discussing a temporary discomfort. We were discussing the shape of the next year of my life. I said no, and he smiled in the way that men smile when they think resistance is foreplay for capitulation. He texted me links to articles about power couples and sent me a calendar invite to a dinner where Victoria would be present. The subject line read ladder. I did not attend that dinner. I went to my sister's apartment and fell asleep on her couch with a headache that sounded like a metronome. The next morning, Grant sent a paragraph that tried to sell the plan as a gift to both of us. He said we could be untouchable if we played this correctly. He said Victoria likes me and that I would be doing a version of acting that pays better than the theater. He said we could even formalize it to remove the messy parts. The verb formalize sat there with a weight I did not want to examine. I wrote back that we would speak later, and then I made a folder on my desktop and named it ladder. You have to call a thing by its right name if you plan to survive it. At first, he played it as a joke at parties. He would say that we were modern and that modern people do not let old rules keep them poor. Friends laughed because laughing is how you keep a room from asking hard questions. I stopped going to parties and he stopped pretending it was a joke. The first time he said that I should consider a civil ceremony with Victoria to lock in our joint future, I waited for his face to normalize. It did not. He said a small ceremony solves optics, that it would be a private arrangement with public benefits, that Victoria needs a stable image to quiet rumors, and that our participation would be compensated in opportunities and in cash. He said we could write an agreement that keeps everything tidy. He told me to think of it as consulting for a corporation in need of social equity. He has a gift for sentences that remove skin from acts that should cause shame. I began to document. I did not engage in debates. I moved everything to text and email. I saved voicemails. I kept a journal with dates and locations and what was said. I took photos of pages in Grant notebooks when he opened them with the abandon of a man who believes he is the main character and that props will keep their secrets. I sat on the balcony and watched the city breathe and reminded myself that sane people can lose track of sanity when a person they love squeezes language until it agrees to lie. I did not plan revenge. I planned survival and the preservation of a self I recognized. The first move was small. Grant forwarded an invitation to a gala where Victoria would host a table with donors from a foundation that supports youth coding programs. He said we should both attend. I agreed because public rooms are safer than private rooms and because I wanted to see Victoria in the wild. She was as advertised, expensive without effort, gracious to the degree that the room began to bend toward her, clever enough to pass for kind if you did not ask her to carry anything heavy. She asked what I do, and I told her that I write for companies that do not know how to tell the truth. She laughed and said that I must be busy. Her eyes did not laugh. They measured. Grant did not stop measuring me either. The night ended with a car ride home where he congratulated himself on how well we had presented as a team. I nodded and stared out at a city that was learning my new face. Victoria began to text me directly. Lunches, coffee near the office, a museum opening. She moved with the ease of someone who has trained the world to part when she approaches. I kept every message. I steered every conversation toward professional topics. Each time she leaned into the personal, I leaned back and asked about budget cycles, or the structure of her org, or the new product line that would launch in spring. She smiled as if she appreciated the discipline. Men in her position often prefer a fawn to a sparring partner. She seemed to want both. I am not a fawn, and I am not interested in sparring that ends with invoices for the privilege of being bruised. Grant escalated. He sent me a draft of an agreement he called an understanding. It read like a ransom note with legalese. It said that our marriage would remain intact in spirit while I engaged in a companionate arrangement with Victoria for the period of 1 year, renewable at the discretion of the parties. It said that, in exchange for my participation, Grant would set aside a percentage of his increased compensation into a fund with my name on it. It said that the arrangement may culminate in a civil ceremony with Victoria for optics during the promotion window. It said that public displays would be choreographed to avoid distress. The document was not enforceable in any court that respects human beings, but it was useful to me for another reason. It revealed his mind without his usual layer of charm. I consulted a lawyer. Her name is Dana, and she speaks in sentences that respect the gravity in words. She asked for everything. I gave her the messages, the draft understanding, the photos of notebook pages, the events, the names of donors, the nights when Grant asked me to practice how I would greet Victoria as a partner and not as a wife of a subordinate. Dana wrote things down with the clarity of a person building a timeline. She talked about coercion, quid pro quo, marital waste if Grant used our money to grease this machine, and about how companies respond to compliance risk when it smells like headlines. She told me to keep being quiet. She told me to keep preserving evidence. She told me that the story would tell itself if we fed it the right food. The second move felt like a step inside an elevator that does not announce its direction. Victoria invited me to a weekend retreat on Bainbridge that she framed as work-life balance for leadership. She said partners were welcome. Grant would be in sessions during the day, and I would be free to join a spouse track that included wine and spa and a private tour of a house that had appeared in a magazine. I agreed with a cheerful text, and then I prepared like a clerk. I checked ferry schedules, looked up the venue, and found a valet service that prides itself on keeping logs tight. I did not install new devices or record anything without consent. I simply paid attention the way I always have and made sure that wherever we were, someone else was also there, whose job required them to notice. The retreat confirmed what Dana had predicted. The line between professional and personal was not thin. It had been erased. Victoria placed her hand on my back when she guided me toward the buffet. She introduced me as a person who understands her better than most. She said that people like us know that love and work are simply two sides of the same coin, and that the coin buys you freedom if you do not waste it. Grant watched me watch her and later said that I needed to lean in more. He said I was stiff. He said Victoria needs warmth. He said the board will only respond to the story if the story feels soft to the touch. He said we are in the final stretch. He said, I am the difference between a future where we both win and a future where we both settle. He loves the word settle when he talks about other people's lives. I told Dana everything. She said it is time to move the case into the company. She drafted a letter to compliance that outlined a potential quid pro quo scheme involving a senior leader and a subordinate spouse, with supporting exhibits that showed pressure, proposed consideration, and the use of marital funds to finance gifts and events in support of the scheme. She asked me if I felt safe. I said yes. She told me to consider a temporary plan to stay with my sister if Grant became aggressive. Grant does not punch walls. He punches with language and silence, and with the promise of a future only he can see. I can fight that. I have fought it before. But I appreciated the plan. Before Dana sent the packet, I staged one controlled confrontation. It was not rage, it was a reading. Grant invited Victoria and 2 senior managers to dinner to celebrate a milestone in the promotion process. He expected me to host and to perform. I cooked and set a table that could have hosted a truce between nations. I placed a slim envelope at my seat. We ate, and they praised the soup, and I listened to them congratulate each other for having the kind of moral flexibility that allows people to sleep after doing harm. When the plates were cleared, I stood and said that I had prepared something for the group to review. I slid the envelope to Grant and said that it contains a timeline and exhibits that document a scheme that involves coercion and misuse of marital assets. I said that the envelope is a courtesy. I said that it will be sent to compliance in the morning with or without any additions they wish to make. I said that I would excuse myself now and that the house would be quiet for the rest of the evening. Then I left them with their wine and their laughter that did not dare to return. Dana filed the next morning. The company acknowledged receipt and assigned investigators. The first week was a flurry of requests. They wanted messages, calendars, expense reports, travel logs, photographs of gifts, names of witnesses. Dana sent them everything with a cover letter that explained the context and anchored the chain of custody. Grant texted me to ask how I could do this to us. He said career murder like it was a concept the law might recognize. I did not respond. Dana told me to keep the line cold. Let counsel speak for me in the only language that matters to institutions, which is nuance on letterhead. Compliance interviews feel like gentle storms. They begin with compliments about your bravery and end with a polite knockout. The investigator asked me to walk through the beginning, to explain the pressure, to describe how I felt during the retreat and during the dinner. She asked for details about the understanding. She did not flinch when I told her that Grant had suggested a civil ceremony with Victoria to signal stability to the board. She asked whether anyone else had heard him say it. I told her about a night when he boasted to a colleague that we were living in the future while the rest of the company was stuck in prudishness. I told her the colleague might not want to be involved. She said witnesses always feel that way until they remember they are citizens. She thanked me and told me that the company takes this seriously. The second wave was financial. Dana filed in family court for separation and requested a temporary order for exclusive use of the apartment. She argued that Grant had used our shared home as a stage for coercion and that I deserved space free from pressure while the case was active. The judge granted a temporary order with a tone that suggested boredom with people who mix power with romance, as if human beings are ingredients in a cocktail. Grant moved into corporate housing while the company investigated. That quiet felt like a new climate system installed overnight. I did not gloat. I bought groceries and cooked and wrote and read and walked in the rain with a hood pulled tight. I organized the folder on my desktop and labeled subfolders with dates and subjects. I cleaned the apartment in a way that felt like washing a wound. I answered questions from the investigator and questions from Dana and from my sister, who asked whether I needed anything beyond tea and time. I needed both, and also a list of tasks that keeps panic from colonizing every hour. I made that list, and my days marched to it without complaint. News travels inside companies the way water finds cracks. I heard from a friend that Victoria was on leave. I heard that the board had hired outside counsel. I heard that the promotion cycle was frozen for the division. Reports of a friendly investment between Grant and Victoria surfaced in the due diligence that should have been performed earlier if anyone had been awake at the wheel. The fund was small and looked like a hobby. Hobbies can become levers when someone wants to apply force to a decision. Compliance understands levers. They also understand how people who like to pretend that rules are a suggestion respond when a real rule taps them on the shoulder. Grant attempted a final pivot. He wrote a long email that framed his actions as performance art in service of organizational innovation. He said that we had all colluded in a fiction that made the company stronger. He said that I had benefited and therefore had no standing to complain. Dana laughed in a way I had not heard from her before. It had weight and lightness, and a promise that she would escort this sentence out of the building with dignity. She wrote back to company counsel with a memo that dismantled his narrative like a clock, placed carefully on a table, and disassembled screw by screw. The memo included the draft understanding, the notes, the retreat itinerary, the dinner seating, the gifts, the charges, the timestamps, and an analysis of how each element violated internal policies I could have recited by heart after weeks of reading them like scripture. The company concluded its investigation with a report that did not need adjectives. Victoria resigned. Grant was terminated for cause. The board issued a statement that referenced values and the importance of process. My name did not appear in the statement, and I liked that. I do not want to be a headline. I want to sleep and to eat and to walk and to write sentences that make people feel seen. I want to open my door to friends without rehearsing what version of the truth the room can handle today. Family court proceeded with the gravity that keeps cities from floating away. Dana pursued recovery through a constructive trust for the money Grant had spent on gifts and travel in service of his plan. We documented hotel stays, dinners, jewelry purchases, tickets to events, and memberships that had been purchased to create scenes with Victoria. The judge read the motion and nodded without sighing. That is the closest thing to applause you get, in rooms where men and women bring their broken arrangements to authority and ask for math to do what love failed to do. We settled on terms that recognized the harm without inviting more of it. I kept the apartment. Grant kept his things and the hope that he could find a new city that did not know his name. The funds spent on the scheme returned to the marital estate and then to me as part of the division. The Constructive Trust walked through accounts and pulled money back to the table in a way that felt like justice wearing a sweater. It was not grand, it was tidy. Tidy is underrated in a culture that prefers spectacle to function. After the orders, air returned. I slept and woke and stretched and fed myself and returned emails without checking them for traps. I finished an assignment for a client who sells good shoes and does not lie about what leather can do. I visited the farmer's market and bought pears that understood sugar. I called my mother and told her I was fine. She said she had a feeling I would be. She always liked Grant at first and then liked him less the more she watched him use jokes as anchors that hold women in place. People asked if I felt vengeance. I told them that vengeance is a fire that consumes the person who tends it unless that person wears the right protective gear. I prefer tools to flames. I used timelines and counsel and policy. I used words that hold in court and do not make me feel smaller later. I used silence in rooms that wanted my scream. I used my feet to walk away from a dinner where people thought my life was their staircase. They will remember that walk longer than they would remember any insult I could have delivered with a raised voice. The city looked different, not better, more honest. Rain felt like it had directions now. The buses arrived with the serious faces of public servants. I stood at crosswalks and waited for light to crown me with permission. I noticed that my shoulders had lowered by a fraction and that I smiled at the barista when she made a joke about the weight of the day. I left bigger tips than I used to because generosity is a ladder out of a hole you did not dig. I found a rhythm that had nothing to do with other people promotions and everything to do with the dignity that comes from promising yourself you will not sell your soul for an extra rung. Months later, Victoria sent a piece of mail that said she hoped we might talk one day. It was handwritten and used formal language that tried to wrap itself around remorse. I did not respond. She can work on her future without borrowing my time. That is what I want for the rest of my life. Fewer loans of my time to people who spend it poorly. More investments in mornings that begin with breath and end with sleep and respect, both as the pillars of a human day. Grant tried to call once from a number I did not know. The voicemail made its way to me by mistake. He said that he thinks we could have reinvented marriage. He said that the world is not ready for the kind of love that thinks strategically. He said that he is not a villain. He said many things that were true and also not. I deleted the voicemail and then I walked to the park and sat on a bench and watched a child jump in a puddle and hold his own hands in the air as if he had won a race. There were no trophies in sight. He still won. I have not changed my name. It was mine before and remains mine after. I fixed a hinge that had been complaining for a year and watched the door close, flush against the frame. I fixed the tier in a curtain that let in a triangle of light that woke me too early. I baked bread for the first time in months and felt the dough push back against my palms in a conversation that made sense. I am rebuilding a house of tasks that feel like sentences that came here to work. The house will hold. I sometimes think about the moment by the table when I slid the envelope across the wood and watched Grant's hands find it and then fear it. I realized that night that fear can be honest. It tells you where the lie is hiding. It points the way toward the truth, not because it is kind, but because it is selfish and wants you to stop feeding it with denial. I follow fear now only long enough to find the door that will take me outside. Then I open the door and step through and let the night have whatever is left inside that room. Here is what I know now. A plan that requires the humiliation of someone who loves you is not a plan. It is a confession of a defect that therapy might address and that the law can clean up when therapy fails. A promotion bought with someone, body and face and time, is not a promotion. It is a debt that will come due at the worst moment. An agreement drafted by a man who thinks women are infrastructure will not survive the morning. The sun is very good at burning away fog when given a chance. I meet mornings with coffee and a notebook and a list of 3 things that require my attention. The list changes, but not the practice. I protect the hours that produce work and rest. I do not attend dinners where my dignity is on the menu. I do not let people dress abuse in the word strategy and sell it to me with hors d'oeuvre. I will sit at tables with people who understand that salvation in this life often looks like a timeline with attachments and a patient voice on the other end of a phone reminding you that you are not crazy. You are simply in a room that lies. You can leave. If I fall in love again, I will remember that love does not ask me to become a tool. Love does not recruit me into a campaign. Love does not require me to sign my name under a line that separates person from product. Love asks for honesty, for a steady calendar, for groceries that get put away and not left to rot because someone was chasing acclaim. Love eats at home happily. Love does not need a board to approve it or a memo to justify its budget. Love pays cash out of a pocket that does not rely on anyone losing for someone else to win. Seattle keeps raining. The light here can be a faithful friend if you let it. Clouds are not a judgment. They are a curtain, and you can still act with integrity behind them. I walk to the water and watch ferries move across the page of the bay like sentences you can rely on. I buy flowers from a woman who asks no questions and wraps stems in paper with the efficiency of a dispatcher. I cut the ends and place them in a jar and watch them drink. They remind me that taking in what sustains you is work, and that even beauty has to practice it or wilt. I am not the heroine of a movie. I am a citizen who remembered to write things down. I am a person who learned that revenge can be quiet and still count as justice if it results in a home where I can read and sleep and call my sister and cook for friends without negotiating my value with someone who thinks value is a room crowded with people applauding a trick. The trick is over. The room is empty. The house is mine. And so is the silence that visits at 9 and leaves at 7 without knocking too loudly. This is how the story closes and opens at once. A door shuts on a man who thought triumph looks like a wife installed as a prop in a display for power. Another door opens on a morning with a list of tasks and a breeze and a neighbor who brings over berries because she bought too many. I say thank you. I wash them and set them on the counter. I eat some and save some. The day builds itself like a good paragraph. It knows where to begin and where to end and how to move without wasting the reader patience. I am both writer and reader now. I keep the pen, I keep the page. I let the rest find another story that will cast them as winners. I no longer care about their casting calls. The most generous thing I can say about Grant is that he taught me to be exact. The most generous thing I can say about Victoria is that she taught me what power looks like when it believes it has no audience, but forever forgets that someone is always in the room making a record, even if that someone is a concierge with a ledger or an assistant who recognizes the shape of an abuse of trust and saves a calendar, invite others, forgot to delete. The world is held together by these people. They do not become famous. They keep the ledger clean so that when you go to the counter and ask for your share of justice, a human being can find the line with your name and point to the figure in the right column. I am not interested in lesson plans for the internet. I am interested in the way my body has begun to trust me. I carry less tension in my jaw. I leave the apartment without rehearsing how I will respond if someone asks me to collaborate on my own diminishment. I return home and the air inside greets me like a partner who knows that presence is currency. I sit at my desk and work on campaigns for companies that know their limits. I stop work at a reasonable hour. I cut vegetables. I season them. I wait for heat to do what heat has always done for people willing to be patient. Then I eat. I wash dishes. I sleep. Tomorrow will come. I am ready to meet it on my terms. There will be people who insist that I overreacted. They will say I cost Grant his career. They will say I should have been a better sport. They are wrong. I did not push him. He jumped. I did not rob him. He paid a price for a service the company does not sell. I did not ruin a love story. I evacuated a structure on fire. I sent a report. I followed instructions from people who studied the rules that allow the rest of us to exist without being trampled by those who find trampling efficient. This is adulthood. It is not glamorous. It is warm when done correctly. I will probably frame the ferry schedule one day and hang it by the door as a joke only I will get. It will remind me of the retreat and of the dock and of the way a person can stand in line for a boat that arrives exactly when it said it would and think that reliability is boring, and then learn that reliability is salvation when the rest of your life has been dragged through improvisation that aims to benefit only those who hold the script. I vote for schedules now. I vote for receipts. I vote for the slow elevator that arrives late and still gets you where you need to go without dropping you between floors so a news cycle can have content. In a few weeks, I will meet friends for dinner at a place that has learned how to keep salt within bounds. We will talk about nothing and then about everything. Someone will ask how I am. I will say that I am good. The word good will sound simple and clean. It will feel like a soft fabric that does not itch. We will order dessert and share without counting bites. I will walk home and the rain will begin, and I will not hurry. The city will smell like itself again. I will climb the stairs and open a door that belongs to me. The lights will come on. The room will not be a stage. The room will be a room, and I will be in it, unperformed, uncoerced, unafraid. The seasons turned, and the investigation that had once filled every crevice of my attention receded into a manageable current. It did not vanish. It became a river I had learned to read. When letters arrived, I answered them. When calls came, I returned them. The shape of the case no longer defined me. It sat on a shelf like a thick book that I could lift without straining and put back when I was done. Dana suggested that I write a statement for myself that would never be published. She said it helps to gather the narrative into one body and then let it rest. I wrote late at night with a lamp that respects quiet. I described the first time Grant rehearsed how I would greet Victoria at a holiday event. I described the way he tried to convert my refusal into a project plan with milestones. I did not soften my own role. I admitted the weeks I spent hoping he would wake up and the afternoons when I told myself that I could handle more than I should have been asked to handle. It mattered to me to name the people who did the right thing when they did not have to. A receptionist who squeezed me into the calendar when the docket was full. A barista who handed me a tea on the house on a day that could have gutted me. A co-worker who covered a deadline without making it an announcement. These are the citizen acts that keep a city from choosing cruelty by default. One of Victoria's former assistants reached out to Dana through counsel and provided notes from calendar invites that had been wiped. The notes were brief and professional, but the pattern sang. Lunches with Grant in locations designed for privacy. Off-site meetings labeled as leadership reflection that canceled when I declined to attend. The assistant did not want trouble. She wanted to set the record straight before the company told a sanitized version of history. I thanked her in a letter that wished her work in rooms with doors that do not slam. I felt a pang for the person I had been when I thought marriage was a structure you could inhabit safely if you just kept your head down and did the chores that maintain a household. Chores matter. They are also not diplomacy. You cannot iron a dress and expect it to replace a boundary. You cannot scrub a pan and call it moral geometry. A home requires clean surfaces and also clean agreements. I now demand both. The apartment needed small repairs that had stared at us for a year and been told to wait. I made a list and did the easy ones myself. A loose knob, a finicky dimmer, a door that demanded a nudge. The tougher work I scheduled with professionals who arrived when they said they would and left behind receipts that looked like confidence. I stapled the receipts to a folder and filed it in a drawer that makes a soft sound when it closes. The sound pleases me more than it should. I take that as a sign that my brain has returned from the emergency station and is ready for maintenance. Dana asked if I wanted to pursue anything beyond the constructive trust. I said I wanted as few legal battles as possible. She nodded and said that sometimes victory looks like choosing not to fight where winning would cost too much. We closed files with a sense of ceremony. She sent me copies with labels that a future version of me will appreciate. She wished me dull years filled with clear mornings. I promised to do my part. I traveled to see my aunt on the peninsula, and we walked a trail that ran through fir and cedar and opened suddenly to water. She told me that the body remembers peace if you let it practice. We stopped on a bench and watched gulls argue about fish with the seriousness of parliaments. She asked if I hated Grant. I said that hatred is a job and I have better ones now. We ate sandwiches and pointed out a seal that surfaced and blinked, as if surprised by its own life. Back in the city, I returned to the habit of buying a Sunday paper and folding it on the kitchen table like a map of the week ahead. News about other people's scandals did not feel like entertainment anymore. It felt like weather alerts. Somewhere there are always storms. My job is not to dance in them unless invited by a good reason. My job is to anchor my own house and lend rope to neighbors when asked. I began to teach a writing workshop at the community center for adults changing careers. Many had been asked to become someone version of useful in ways that took pieces of them. We talked about words and money and boundaries. I told them that clarity is a kindness. We practiced telling a story without apologizing for existing. We printed drafts and used pens. It is old-fashioned and it works because paper slows down the part of the mind that wants to run to the end without doing the work of the middle. I ran into a board member from the foundation that had hosted the gala. He thanked me without saying what for, which is the best kind of thanks in public. He said the foundation had reviewed policies about proximity between donors and staff. He said they had put in fire breaks. He said firefighting works best when you plan where the fire will jump and cut lines ahead of time. He smiled and moved on. I walked away feeling like the world can learn if you hand it a clean diagram and patience. Grandmother mailed a letter that chronicled her sadness over how the marriage ended. I read it on the couch and felt the old urge to explain and to ask for a better audience. I returned the letter to its envelope and put it in a box that holds things I may read again one day when my blood runs cooler. I did not respond. I do not owe everyone a lesson plan. Some people get weather reports only. Chance of truth with a high of dignity. Bring a coat. The apartment complex installed new lighting in the hallway, and for a week every evening felt like a rehearsal for a play about order. The lights came on with a soft hum, and nobody spoke louder than necessary. Small changes can heal more than you expect when you are not braced for impact. I want a life made of small changes that add up to a long corridor, where the doors are level and the exit signs do not lie. I found a therapist who understands power without becoming obsessed with it. She did not turn me into a case study. She asked where in my body the dread lives and what the dread wants to keep from me. It wants me to stay small to avoid attention from predators in suits. We taught the dread some manners. It can still visit. It cannot decide the itinerary. A client asked me to write a campaign about accountability. I almost said no because I am suspicious of companies that want to leverage virtue. The team surprised me. They had receipts, they had restructured pay, they had removed a manager who treated deadlines like an excuse to harm junior staff. I wrote the campaign and it felt honest. The public may not believe it. That is fine. The employees will feel the difference, and that matters more than clicks. I made friends with the security guard in our building who has been there since before I moved in. He watches nights turn into mornings and says the city is not as broken as the loudest voices claim. He said people return lost wallets. They wait with kids who miss their stops. They hold doors. He said my face looks lighter. I told him it is because the house listens when I speak now. He laughed and said houses are good listeners when you pay the rent and say please. The first holiday season after the case closed arrived with rain and pine and the smell of sugar in every hallway. I hosted a tiny dinner with candles and a roast that came out better than I deserved. We played music low and did not perform gratitude. We lived it with dishes washed before sleep and leftovers packaged like gifts for the next day. I went to bed early and the house thanked me by staying quiet until the morning stepped onto the stage with soft shoes. Sometimes I still receive a message from an unknown account that tries to bait me into a fight about the past. I delete it. I have no time to rent out to the theater of resentment. I spend my time on bike rides by the canal and on recipes that teach me patience, and on friends who show up with bread and an appetite for talking about everything except promotions and strategy meetings, and whose name goes on which plaque. When spring arrived, the city set itself to green and I took a class on pottery. Clay taught me about pressure and release. It taught me that the shape you think you are making will collapse if you try to force it into existing before it is ready. I held that lesson in my palm and brought it home. I will not force my life. I will meet it on a wheel that turns at a reasonable speed, with my hands steady and my breath slow. There is a bench near the water that has a small plaque dedicated to those who did the right thing when no one was looking. I sit there more often now. I think about the assistant who sent notes, the clerk who stamped a page, the investigator who did not allow Charm a seat at the table, the neighbor who holds packages safe in the lobby. I think about how a city is a chorus, and that carrying a tune is a serious responsibility when the song is about dignity. On a warm afternoon, I walked past the building where Grant once worked and felt nothing but the weight of my groceries. That felt like a mark in a private ledger. The past had ceased to rent space in my present. I hope he learns something that does not require anyone else to pay for his education. That is the only wish I have left for him. A woman from my workshop landed a job with benefits after years of contract work that kept her anxious. She brought me a small plant as a thank you, and we set it by the window. She said she had said no to a task that crossed a line on her third day. She said it felt like jumping without a net. She said she landed fine. We both smiled and watched the plant find its angle toward the light. By late summer, I realized that I had not checked the folder labeled ladder in weeks. I opened it and looked at the names and the files and the dates and felt a wave of respect for the version of me who did the tedious things. I closed it and backed it up, and then I walked to the market and bought cherries and let them stain my fingers. The stains did not feel like wounds. They felt like proof that I had eaten well. The building next door replaced its mailboxes, and the new ones open with a code instead of a key. I laughed quietly at how codes have followed me all year. These codes do not hide people. They hide packages and reveal them with equal efficiency. I collected a book and a letter and a small parcel from my aunt. The letter told a story about a bridge back home that had been rebuilt with patience and steel. She said that crossing it now feels like hope with a railing. A friend asked me if I would ever forgive Victoria. I said forgiveness is a choice I will consider when I no longer feel the need to keep records open. The records are nearly closed. When they close, I will see what remains in the drawer. If forgiveness is there, I will pick it up and try it on. If it does not fit, I will not force it. Some garments look better in stories than they do on bodies. When the year anniversary of the dinner arrived, I set the table again with a simple meal and ate alone with music soft and the city outside doing its usual job. I slid an envelope across the wood to myself and opened it and read a note I had written in the morning. It said, "Well done for walking away without spectacle." It said, "Keep going." It said, "Do not trade your peace for any one ladder ever again." I placed the note in a drawer and washed the dishes and went to bed. Time does not erase harm. It folds it. The creases become less sharp if you keep folding around them in the right direction. I keep folding. My days look like clean paper that has been handled by careful hands. I take pride in that. I am allowed.